TheorySabers.com.
Okay, Denis Villeneuve is detailing why he doesn't want to direct a Star Wars film. And I think, I read it yesterday, and I think there's like a little bit of bullshit behind it, behind what his actual real reason is, but let's get to it. The Dune filmmaker says he fell out of love with the franchise a rather long time ago. Okay, why? While on the Town podcast, Villeneuve shared that the Star Wars blew it after two films with 1983's Return of the Jedi, which most fans consider a bit of a step down from 77's A New Hope and 80's Empire Strikes Back. He says, I was the target audience. I was 10 years old. It went to my brain like a silver bullet. I became obsessed with Star Wars, he said. I mean, The Empire Strikes Back is the movie that I anticipated the most in my life. I saw the movie a billion times on screen. I was traumatized by The Empire Strikes Back. I adore Star Wars. Which makes sense because he's gone on to make some more, I would say Dune is kind of dark. The problem is that it all derailed in 1983 with Return of the Jedi, he continued. It's a long story. I was 15 years old, and my best friend and I wanted to take a cab and go to LA and talk to George Lucas. We were so angry. Still today, the Ewoks. It turned out to be a comedy for kids. Star Wars became crystallized in its own mythology, very dogmatic. It seemed like a recipe, no more surprises. So I'm not dreaming to do a Star Wars because it feels like code is very codified. So there's a few things I take from this, and we're going to talk about what he says about it being for kids. We're also going to talk about how he's, I think, also saying this to just shit on Disney and be like, I don't want to have anything to do with the Disney Star Wars stuff. But he can't say that because he probably still wants to work with Disney on other projects and doesn't want to like completely, cancel that out. So he kind of just puts it on George, where he's like, oh yeah, the Ewoks, the Ewoks. Okay, look, I get it. Ewoks, they were a marketing thing for George for the most part. He wanted to sell plushies. He wanted to sell the toys. But also, the way he explained it was that it's the whole thing of Star Wars politically is that it's the little guys versus big guys. So here you have this big scary empire with all their stormtroopers and their tech and their machines. And then you got the Ewoks, who are these like primitive native species to Endor, forest moon of Endor. And so you have them using, thousands of years, let's say, of tactics to outsmart this big, scary, technologically inclined, empire, advanced empire. And that was the point of it. That was what he was going for. But I don't know. I never to this day did I look at it and be like, oh, this is stupid. This is for kids. I literally looked at it as like these fluffy little teddy bears who were going to eat Luke and Han were able to outsmart with tactics on their home world of the Forest Moon of Endor to destroy the Empire. I don't know. I never really saw it as anything other than that. So I think he's a little bit, I don't know. I don't agree with his opinion. Also, the fact that this story is, it's a beautiful continuation of Luke's arc. I would say Return of the Jedi is one of my favorite films because you got Luke being a little bitch in A New Hope. Then you got Luke being too hasty and egotistical, runs away in The Empire Strikes Back, thinks he can do it without finishing his training, even when his masters, his elders say you can't, you're not ready. And then gets his ass handed to him, comes back in Return of the Jedi. Just freaking badass. Like walking through. I'll never forget being a kid and seeing Luke, after having seen him in Empire Strikes Back and then seeing Luke walk through Jabba's palace with the hood up and just freaking, just so cool, so ice, just choking dudes out. And then walking in and almost like Palpatine in a sense, where he's like, I've given you these two droids as a token of my goodwill. And it's like, that is even a setup in and of itself. R2's got Luke's lightsaber in it. It's just, there's so much in there, I think, that Return of the Jedi did really well. It seems like he just hates it because of the freaking scene at the end with the Ewoks. The Oscar-nominated director seemed reluctant to talk about a potential Dune 3 and simply said he might be doing it elsewhere. He said he'd prefer to return to individual, unique films rather than dive into another franchise. Villeneuve also noted he does not want to work for a streaming service like Netflix. The big screen is part of the language to share a story together, to receive the communal, emotional experience of cinema in a theater. We're not meant to be alone. We're meant to share together. I believe the theater experience will prevail. Yeah, that's true, except for the fact that there's freaking phones everywhere now, and people are so disrespectful in movie theaters where they're always on their phone, they're always talking, laughing. It's insane. I can't even be bothered to go to a movie theater anymore, not because I don't love it, but because I just can't stand people being so disrespectful and taking you out of the immersion with their goddamn phones and talking and bullshit. And that's why I literally built a movie theater in my house, because I just don't want to deal with that shit, but I love movies. So that's what I think about that. I Personally, I don't think he really means exactly what he says. That's just my opinion. I think he's trying to still get in maybe with Disney at some point sometime. But who knows? What's your take on the claim that Return of the Jedi would have been better if the Ewoks were replaced by Wookiees and took place on Kashyyyk instead of Endor? So if it okay, look, if it's Wookiees, I mean those guys are terrifying. They're so scary. You have this like 9-foot Sasquatch that could rip you limb to limb. You're telling me that that's... I think it's a much better win for the Ewoks to show that the little guys really can win if they work together against the Empire. I mean, I don't think any of us can really argue the fact that Wookiees would destroy like any stormtrooper one-on-one, even one-on-5. So I think it's a much... For what George wanted to show and tell, I think, you know, having Ewoks made a lot more sense. And it also helped him with sales for toys. Do I think Wookiees would have been cooler? Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You know? They could have had Ewoks running around there as well as like the little, I don't know, not a Wookiee species, but they could have had them as like, you know, another indigenous being of Kashyyyk. They could have done that. They could have been, you know, Ewoks are also part of Kashyyyk. They're just like a different, you know, species. Something somewhat similar. They're all covered in fur and they look like dogs.